doesn't work. You can't solve the problem by doing exactly the same thing that created our problem. So I think what we have to do is wake up someday and say that this system has to be changed. We just can't patch it up. Because the Soviet system came apart because of economic reasons. Fortunately, we didn't have to fight the Soviets and have a nuclear exchange. But they failed because their system failed. And today, that is what we're witnessing. We're witnessing a failed system. We're witnessing a failure of liberal economic policy of the Keynesian variety that says that we should have a planned economy. And this is what we're facing up to, but there's no admission now in Washington that the country's broke. So we have been conditioned now for many, many decades that we go to the government and the government's going to bail everybody out. And and both parties argue the same case for different reasons. They all have their special interests. And it's worked for a while because our country was very wealthy and we had a lot of money in the bank. But now it's not the case. Now the conflict comes. Why don't those people get along together in Washington? For a very precise reason. They're fighting over a pie that is practically gone, a shrinking pie. There's no welfare, and yet they are still conditioned that all wealth has to be redistributed through the federal government. We have to wake up and say the government produces nothing, only free people produce. We need to free up our society. But the Federal Reserve System, in the way they are able to monetize debt, encourages the growth of big government. Because if we had to pay taxes, or we had to borrow the money and not print the money, this would all come to an end. I think that, and I did this just as to make a point, I introduced a bill one time to get rid of withholding taxes. Not that I really want to have anybody have to send in money to the government, because my real position on income tax is repeal the 16th Amendment. So the purpose of repealing the withholding tax is to make the point that if we all had to send a check in every month to pay for the government we're getting, believe me, there would be a revolution in this country real soon, and if people would rebel and they wouldn't send the money in, there would be a lot of changes, and people just have to realize how much this government is costing us, and it's costing us plenty. But the way the system works, borrowing delays the penalty, and the inflation, of course, inflating the money supply delays it as well. But it also participates in allowing us to engage in other issues that we shouldn't be engaged in. And that is a deeply flawed foreign policy that has to be changed. Yeah. Wrong with this administration, and especially in foreign policy, but the truth is the foreign policy that we have is a bipartisan. There's too much compromise in borrowing and spending and taxing, and too much compromise on foreign policy. They get together because they have the same foreign policy. The rhetoric may be different at election times. There may be a belief that the parties are somewhat different, but if you end up with a Republican or Democrat, you have the same foreign policy of adventurism and involvement overseas and occupation.
Yeah.
So the real solution today is for us, and you especially, a younger generation, to decide, look, it's time to change our foreign policy. Why don't we look at the Constitution? There's no authority for us to occupy other nations and tell them what to do. So we shouldn't be in the business of occupying. There's no authority in the Constitution for the executive branch, and particularly the president, to go to war without permission by the Congress and without a declaration of war.
Yeah!
Just think of how much better off we would have been if we had not fought any of the wars since World War II, because none of them were declared and none were really won. And we have lost and suffered from it. And yet, even today, we have the Secretary of Defense going before the committee, and they say, well, where do you get this authority to go to war? Oh, I get it from the United Nations and NATO. This was one of the major issues why the revolution was fought, to make sure the king couldn't go to war on his own and put the taxes on the colonists. They said, no way, it should only be by the people through the Congress to make these declarations.
Exactly.
So right now, today, we have our government's going to war under UN resolutions or under NATO, but the reasons that they give are so disturbing. Right now, it's called preemptive war, that we're allowed to preempt another country and go to war. A preemptive war is a term that is used to soften aggression. That's what it really is. When you invade another country, it's aggression. In the last 4 years, the last 10 years, there's $4 trillion added to our national debt due to the wars going on in the Middle East. I want to end those wars. End them quickly. We just marched in. But not only must we win the wars that are unnecessary and unconstitutional and very damaging to us both morally as well as economically, it's time to bring our troops home from around the world. World War II's over. It's time we come home from Korea, it's time we come home from Japan, it's come home from Germany, save billions and billions of dollars. Maybe we can take care of our people here at home a lot easier. And who knows, we may be better liked if we came home rather than telling other countries exactly what they should do. You know, sometimes if you're an independent person, you run for the presidency, you get on a national stage and there are debates, sometimes you can get some negative things thrown at you. But one day when we were talking about foreign policy, I made these suggestions because I thought it was reasonable. Why don't we just think about following the golden rule in foreign policy? Don't do anything to any other country that we don't have to do. Following the just war principles also might be a big help to us. But you know, when I made that suggestion, the reaction wasn't the same as I get here. Because they did exactly the opposite, you know, wow, this is terrible, what kind of heresy is this, you know. But there's a lot of reasons why we go to war. There's oil, there's influence from other countries, as well as there's influence from our oil companies, as well, that we send our troops over there to protect oil. And there's also a firm belief which has continued since Woodrow Wilson, making the world safe democracy, that we are to spread our exceptionalism, even if it takes force, because we are such an exceptional nation. Yes, we have been exceptional. We're not so exceptional now, but if we are truly an exceptional nation, run a good economy, have civil liberties here at home, and we have peace that we contribute to, then maybe they would emulate us and do it voluntarily, but using force will not make them live the way we think they should. But under the conditions of war, it's always easier for a government to undermine liberties here at home, and they have taken this advantage. We're in a war. It's a pervasive war around the world. It's a global war on terrorism. Terrorism is still defined in the code, both nationally and internationally, as a crime. But now we're in war against everybody, any country in the world that we feel like dropping bombs on through our drones. We assume that we have this right to do this. Matter of fact, there was an announcement today that we're going to have nuclear drones, and these drones can stay up for months and months at a time. And they're also planning in the future sometime to have 30,000 of them flying around this country itself. Someday we'll have to remind a few of them up there with the Fourth Amendment says they're not supposed to be spying on us, they're supposed to protect our privacy.
Yeah!
And we're not supposed to have secrecy in the government, we're supposed to know what our government's doing all the time.
Yeah!
And this, of course, is the reason why we have tried to protect whistleblowers and give them a little protection when they want to tell us what's really going on in our government. But guess what? The whistleblowers are mistreated when they do give us this information because they don't want us to know exactly what's going on with our government. And we do need to know, and it's up to us to demand that we know what's happening. But under these conditions of perpetual war, of course for perpetual peace, and that's the good motivation, our presidents have done more things. I mean, just right after 9/11, because of the misunderstanding of that, they say, well, the American people must be too free, so we have to punish the American people, we have to spy on the American people. So the American people ended up getting more punishment than the people of, hey, so what about that country that had 15 out of the 19 terrorists?
Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely nothing. But immediately almost, we passed this ornery, ridiculous, terrible bill called the Patriot Act. Now, when I asked a member I was sitting next to why he was voting for the Patriot Act, and I said, you know, there's nothing good in it. And he says, well, I haven't read the whole thing, but you're right, there's not going to be anything good in it. I says, well, why are you going to vote for it? He says, well, how am I going to go home and, right after this crisis, how am I going to go home and explain to them that I voted against the Patriot Act under these conditions? I said, well, why don't you do it? Because that's your job. Go home and explain it to them why it's a bad piece of work.
Yeah!
So they call it a Patriot Act, and that just adds fuels to making the members of Congress, reluctant to vote against it. But they should have called it repeal the Fourth Amendment Act. Maybe we would have had a few more of us voting against it.
Yeah!
But the Patriot Act essentially has gutted the Fourth Amendment. There is not much protection of privacy. They can look at any of our records now, and it's expanding rapidly without the proper search warrants. And that is one of the basic principles of a free society is privacy. Get the government out of our lives. We need to know what they're doing. They have no business knowing what we're doing.
Yeah!
You know, on January 1st this year, we had a few new laws passed on us. Probably these are across the whole country. And who knows, you may have a few here in California passed on you on January 1st too, because across the nation, there were 40,000 new laws passed. I'd like to be the first president to repeal 40,000 laws.
President Bull! President Bull! President Bull! President Bull!
And for once, let's shrink the size of the Federal Register. You gotta make it smaller. That's what we need. Nobody can understand it anyway.